Hey guys, it's me Terabyte, and you already know me. And today we are here to discuss a bit about AWS, that is Amazon Web Services. So we'll talk about how AWS work, and we'll just understand like what exactly is AWS for the sake of beginners. I'm here to explain some information on AWS, like how it is working, what are the persistences, what are the attack vectors, and how they can be exploited, and other kind of stuff. I call this bit playing with AWS, AWS persistence and lateral movement techniques. That's what we're gonna look into here. I just realized I messed up with the technique spelling, but you can ignore that. Right. So moving forward, you already know me, so definitely I'm not gonna waste my time in my introduction. You are here on my channel, so obviously you know me already. If not, then you can visit my social media profiles. This is who I am. I'm also known as Terabyte. They call me Akash Sharma, but I prefer Terabyte. And they ask me how old I am. I'm way too younger than universe. I don't tell that. And these are some of my professional certificates. You can look into it later. So the agenda for the video is going to be, we are going to talk about the introduction to AWS, the infection vectors, hiding techniques in AWS, persistent techniques in AWS, and AWS hardening tips, like basically what we can do to, enhance the security. So let's talk about what is AWS. Okay, so before that, we're going to talk about who is Amazon and what are their web services. So Amazon, like a few years back, just was known for selling books, and now you know that he have Jeff Bezos has become the millionaire, actually multi-billionaire, right? And he was once the richest man. Now they have like started in different programs, like they have get gotten into web services. They have their own space program, so on and so forth. So Amazon have developed multifold at times, right? And that's why like they have introduced this web service program that also like provide different other kind of services like content delivery and other stuff. So yeah, and why should you care? The reason is because if you talk about the industry right now, the major gap of the industry, the major sectors are definitely using AWS for web services, and this is a very drastic change we have seen in the last 5 7 years, I guess. And the involvement of cloud and other stuff is also like enhancing this kind of usage, and hence AWS is becoming necessary these days, and they are also using it. With the necessity of such a technology, there is a necessity of security as well, for sure, right? So we're going to talk about here user-based AWS compromise vectors, like when users are actually dealing with AWS in the corporate sector, what exactly they go through with. So the first thing, because people are coming into an organization, they are communicating with the entities and other bodies of the organization, then definitely there are going to be some user-based vectors. First thing that I want to talk about is the infected machines. There are still organizations who provide remote jobs, or maybe who provide BYOD policies, like bring your own device policy. So in these kind of scenarios, infected machines plays a very important role, because if the organization is impenetrate, you cannot penetrate into an organization, then there is a big possibility that something from the outside can come into it, like maybe in the form of an employee, or maybe if in the form of any body of the organization, right? If I am having an infected cell phone, if I take it to my organization, that ransomware from the cell phone may also spread into the whole network. There's a possibility, right? Maybe I have a USB drive which I got from my son from his school, and now I am bringing it to my own office, and I'm plugging it in my own computer in the office. That might also infect it. So this is something that is going to, exist for a long time and have been existing for a very long time so far. So this is something that we cannot fix completely, but definitely we can implement some of the compliance policies for the same. But that's a whole different ball game. Next is phishing. Phishing, we all say, okay, we are all pro and we are all so intelligent and intellectually understanding that, okay, we know when we are falling for phishing, but actually it's not true. There are some instances that AWS can be a very good vector for phishing attacks, because you can host applications, you can host services on AWS, and the people can actually use it for phishing purposes, because they can hide URL, they can modify URLs in such a way, because non-technical people basically do not understand this much of information, they cannot process it, and hence they fall for this kind of stuff. So it's quite obvious. Phishing is also one of the very common thing as a vector. Next is credential leakage. This is also a very big problem. Recently, I got a few bugs, and you won't believe that they were so easy, and some real silly people actually did that. What happened was some of the credentials were leaked on GitHub repositories, and people were actually putting up questions including their credentials. Maybe it can be like a server IP, or it can be an internal IP address, or server secret key access token, or something like that. Maybe even usernames. I've seen username and passwords in GitHub repository questions. Like, let's suppose if there's a company who provides a content management system, right? So that CMS might be having some error. So some user or some employee raised a ticket in the GitHub repository, including that kind of a credential. Hence, credential leakage plays a very big role. I would like to specifically focus on the topic of digital dumpster diving, because when you are actually, in the phase of reconnaissance, you should also look into this kind of stuff, because you never know who have been so much silly, and they have also, they have also leaked some credentials for you on the internet, on the public domain. So they can be Pastebin links, they can be GitHub, they can be Bitbucket, they can be VirusTotal. VirusTotal is a very great resource for this kind of stuff as well. I remember one of my friends really got a great bounty from one of the transportation company here in India, and that was actually some credential leaked on VirusTotal, and that was like a, you can say, as an access token. So yeah, I have seen cases, I have faced cases myself like this. So credential leakage is one of the top things. Next is social engineering. So if you see, on the whole, if you see the pattern here, the compromise vectors are not much of a technical stuff, but this also involves the compliance stuff. See, so it's not just the technology that you can exploit; it is the compliance factors that can also be exploited, and hence it can lead to some sort of an attack. So it can lead to some sort of compromising of AWS services. So social engineering is, obviously, we understand, like, if we can make people give out their information pretty easily, it's not that a big deal. We have done that in our times, of course. I hope you will relate to it. If not, then I'm going to make some videos on social engineering maybe later or in the upcoming time. So yeah, we'll see that. So these are some user-based AWS compromise vectors. Next, if you talk about service-based AWS compromise vector, we have seen what happens from a user's perspective. Now let's understand what happens from the service-based perspective. They can be third-party monitoring services, as in, like, we have some packet monitoring service, or let's say we have like a gateway, a wireless gateway, which actually is monitoring the whole traffic. And if that is third-party and that third-party is exploited, then definitely my whole traffic is being hijacked already, right? So this is also one of the major concern, because in Wi-Fi's, we do have this practice of having gateways, like login gateways, where we can put in our credential and then we can put, log into a Wi-Fi. So it's like a web portal coming up. So this is just an example of a third-party service. There can be other monitoring service as well. So they are also one of the vector. Metadata leakage. This is very common and very AMI poisoning, and metadata leakage is very, very easy to find, to be honest. It's just that you have to go through that reconnaissance phase. If you talk about Amazon's web service in specific, you can definitely look into GitHub repositories for that. If not, then you can maybe look into the archives, like on archive.org. You can look into that website, and you can see like what kind of services were being used, what kind of metadata is being leaked through some of the you can say some of the data that is being represented. So yeah, I'll be like talking about some automation maybe in some of the upcoming videos on metadata leakage and reconnaissance. So yeah, let's keep it for the future. Instance profiles. Instances. So if you're creating a platform on AWS, you are also creating an instance for the service execution. So if that profile is also given out, so that is also one of the vectors that can lead to some sort of an attack. Public EBS, Elastic Block Store snapshots. So This is something that you create in an AWS in order to utilize the services being provided. So if these snapshots are also leaked out, that's also great to attacks. We might talk about these every single type of attack in AWS in the upcoming series, maybe. But for now, I think this is explanatory enough for you to understand what are the service-based AWS compromise vectors. Talk about hiding in AWS, it's pretty easy. I mean, people have been debating for a long time. I have been part of those debates that if AWS is actually vulnerable to these kind of silly stuff, actually. So yeah, it is indeed. If you talk about CloudTrail alterations, they can be like log deletion, stopping of logging at all. So what can happen, like if I am actually into the AWS environment, I can actually, being an attacker, there is a possibility that I can delete the logs or maybe just stop making any of the further logs, so that I am basically hiding myself. The whole concept behind hiding is that I am not showing myself out as an attacker, as an invader into the system, that I have compromised it. So yeah, that kind of alterations can be done. There is S3 trail storage alterations. They can be altering the log rotation or retention policies. I can maybe changing those kind of stuff, like how the logs are being created or how they are being retained into the system. Or I can change the location simply. Like, let's suppose if the developer or the management is actually able to see the logs in a specific directory, I can maybe change it to some different directory, so they are basically not getting the logs, right? And they don't know like which directory I have seen or I have made. Or maybe I can keep changing directory every week. I can do that as well as an attacker. So these kind of alterations can also be done. Storage alterations, okay? So this is S3 trail storage alteration. Then comes the part of key management system. There is an E capital. Okay, never mind. Let's not talk about it. So AWS Key Management System, KMS. Encrypt the log files. Simple as that. If I encrypt it by myself, I know the decryption key, nobody else can open it, so they cannot basically see the logs. So this is something that you do with this is like a last resort. If nothing else is available, then you do it, because this will definitely raise a suspicion in the management. Okay, these are being encrypted, that means something is in there and they are not able to open it and they are not able to use it. That definitely leads to the conclusion that there is an attack. So yeah, they can be different. This is something that I take as a last resort. Otherwise, I think storage alterations is one of the best thing that I can go for. Maybe you can change the retention policies. That's the best one you can go for. Otherwise, anything else you will do, it will just definitely raise a ticket in the management. So yeah, I'm not saying that you should do it. I mean to say, like, this can be done. These are some of the best hiding techniques in AWS so far that I understand. Next, we talk about the persistence, all right? Persistence of an attack, persistence of a compromising activity, right? Typo squatting, creating a new user, that can be done, that I can create a new user and I can behave like a user, and that way I won't be caught in the act. And they can be creating temporary users. That way, definitely temporary users are something that definitely people ignore, that obviously, like, they're not having all the privileges and stuff. That way I can persist in the system, right? I know how I got in. Now I'm creating a user from my own and I'm being a user now, and I can get into the system anytime I want. So that way I am persisting myself. Next is creating new user access key or backdooring the existing roles. This is the best one so far. If you like create a new user access key, that way you have a ticket to travel anytime. You just have the access key, you can go in there and you have the new one and they don't know about it. Or maybe you can just leave a backdoor in the existing roles. If there is an administrator, just find a backdoor. Maybe you can find in the privileges, right? Or the kind of access that is given to different kind of platforms. That way you can do it. Maybe you can create a new instance altogether and you can give yourself a special privilege. So that way you're just leaving a backdoor in the existing roles. That is a possibility. Backdooring AMIs or modification of the default security groups. So if there is a group policy being maintained, you can simply modify that. But those modifications, to be very frank, as from my experience, are regularly monitored. So there is a probability that the organization can check into it. Again, I am not here to talk about how to be persistent as an attacker. I'm just talking about from that perspective that how an attacker can be persistent in an AWS environment, right? So these kind of stuff can take place, and the best one that I understand so far is the second one, that is creating new user access key. That's something that I consider is a great way for persistence. Yeah, because if you are having access, you can every time create a new user access key. That's not a big deal. So these are some of the ways of persistent that you can that we can see in an AWS compromising environment. Um, Now we have talked about a lot of attacks and different kind of stuff that can take place in the AWS. We can talk about attempting to be more secure, right? In this kind of an attempt, we are trying to implement some of the you can say preventive measures, right? As we say in common layman language, use IAM instead of the root account. So IAMs basically they create a special kind of privileges, okay, and these privilege segregation is done quite differently rather than of root accounts. So if you have like a root account, if that account is compromised, it's all done, right? If you're using IAMs, the segregation is there is a hierarchy being maintained. So I believe that is a bit more tough to break into. Utilize a least privilege model. That this model states that one user can have only need to know basis privilege, that like we say in the layman language, need to know basis. So in this kind of privilege model, you're not given a lot of privileges, but the least as they can give, right? Like let's say for editing files, or maybe just adding new files or reading new files, so that kind of least stuff that can be given, right? Rather than giving privilege to make a new user, which is least privilege, they don't give a privilege at all to make a new user. So that kind of stuff can be done with this LPM. Use instance profiles. So yeah, this is one of the good practice that I personally suggest to people who are dealing with AWS, that when you're using different kind of profiles with instances, that actually creates, you can say, a different, that actually creates a hindrance for an attack, because when we have different kind of profiles, it makes it tough to understand, or as an attacker, like which one's having what kind of privileges. So if you are having multiple profiles for a single instance, then there are different hierarchies that you have to go through, and this actually prevents the attack. So it's just like an extra layer of cheese on your bread. So it's just like that. Audit everything. That's something that I'll say to everyone. I often deal with students and people from SOC, from the Security Operations Centers. I often tell them, audit everything, man. Like, this is something you have to definitely go to CloudTrail. I misspelled it. Sorry for that. AWS configs, you have to look into the configurations every time, just audit them every time. What are the default credentials being inputted and everything else? What are the default credentials being inputted and everything else? AWS Cloud Watches, you should also be looking into them. So what I mean to say is that I can name a lot more. So these three are the common ones, but definitely you should look into everything at all, like when you're dealing with AWS. Yeah, so that these kind of attempts can be made. Um, all right. So that was the end of my templates. All right. So I was making this presentation so far. So I think observation so far on AWS as well, and on AWS and as well as on the security part as well. So I believe that there can be different attacks that we can talk about in the coming future. We can talk about different kind of attack vectors. Maybe they might change and modify as for the coming time. But these were some of the points that I wanted to share with this video. If you're new to AWS, you're starting off with AWS, I'm coming up with some videos on configuring and utilizing AWS from the CLI and from the graphic console. So stay tuned for that, definitely. And this is it for the video. Thank you so much, guys, for your response. I really appreciate it. In the upcoming videos, I'm trying to put new content as much as I can, and I'll be delivering as much content as I can in a month or in a week, maybe. So yeah, and sorry, apologies for the delayed video. I'll be trying to be more regular and persistent in this scenario. Right. Thank you so much for staying so far, and I hope you keep the scene alive, keep doing what you're doing, the great stuff, and Yeah, support me, guys. I'm just trying to be as much available for you people, and I'm trying to make new videos. Subscribe my new channel, like with the videos if you feel so. Comment down whatever you feel like. If you want new topics, new videos to be introduced, just let me know that I'm here for you. And yeah, follow me on Instagram too. Why not? @terabyte official. So see you till the next time, and till then, take care. Keep the scene alive. Bye bye.